Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. In the current Arch-Emperor dynasty, the Arch-Emperor was actually only a figurehead. The Grand Heaven Master held the true power, and controlled both the Son of Heaven and the aristocracy. However, that was mostly what happened behind the scenes. Furthermore, in the grand scheme of things, it didn't matter too much that the Arch-Emperor was weak, he was only the current reigning Arch-Emperor. Nobody could say for sure what would happen when the next Arch-Emperor rose up. Furthermore, the Grand Heaven Master had not followed the example of the Celestial from Heavenspan Island, and turned himself into an emperor. As far as many people were concerned, the Grand Heaven Master was actually being quite benevolent and merciful. Even more people hoped to just keep their distance from the issue. Not daring to get involved, they kept their true feelings vague, allowing the Grand Heaven Master and the Arch-Emperor to handle things on their own, as long as the Arch-Emperor dynasty itself continued. Therefore, the events playing out right now were like a bolt out of the blue, and had placed the problems surrounding the issue of the Grand Heaven Master and the Arch-Emperor right smack dab in the open. Everyone in the square was cursing Bai Xiaochun inwardly for being so vile as to drag them into a situation they had been working so hard to avoid. In fact, most of them greatly regretted having come to attend the event to begin with. Of course, the Arch-Emperor was also caught completely unprepared by what was happening, and was aware that the events of this day would determine once and for all how powerful he was. Bai Xiaochun blinked a few times, his heart trembling with nervousness. However, he knew that his hand had been forced. The second prince and the Grand Prince had already made a move against him, and were it not for the Grand Heaven Master, he would surely have been dead and buried here in the wildlands. You can't blame me for this, Arch-Emperor. If you want to blame somebody, blame those two sons of yours. By this point, his mind was made up, his fate was now completely tied to the Grand Heaven Master. At the moment, the entire square was silent. The heavenly marquises and dukes were all standing there looking down at their feet. For the first time ever on the day of ancestral sacrifices, the entire imperial palace was completely silent. It made quite the sharp contrast with the raucous, celebratory noise coming from the common people down below in the city. The Arch-Emperor wasn't saying anything, nor was the Grand Heaven Master. Everyone in the hall stood there without making a peep. The princes and princesses had bitter looks on their faces as they looked down at the ground, hearts filled with hatred for Bai Xiaochun at the disaster he had caused, and dread of the Grand Heaven Master. However, the silence didn't last for very long. Eventually, one of the heavenly marquises gritted his teeth and stepped forward. Clasping hands, he bowed to the Arch-Emperor and Grand Heaven Master, then spoke out in a loud voice. It's very clear to me that Inspections Commissioner Bai Hao is holding a diva soul. Now that the first person had stepped forward to make a statement, a second followed. Then a third. One by one, more than 100 heavenly marquises did the same. That's definitely a diva soul, correct? If you look closely, it's obviously a diva soul. Each and every person said the same thing, that it was a diva soul. Some of the people who stepped forward really were loyal to the Grand Heaven Master, but not all of them. And yet, none of them hesitated for even a moment to make their stance clear. And of course, many of them were cursing Bai Xiaochun to death. However, their faces were covered with somber expressions as they made their statements regarding the diva soul. Even the 9 heavenly marquises who had attacked Bai Xiaochun did the same, including Zhao Shanlin. Although he was swearing in his heart, it was with a booming voice that he said, anyone can see that it's definitely a diva soul. As the heavenly marquises made their statements, the faces of the imperial princes and princesses grew paler and paler. Bitter smiles spread out on the faces of the two sinister old men. As for the Arch-Emperor, he sat there calmly, watching the heavenly marquises and dukes. The coldness in his eyes from earlier was gone, and his face was expressionless. However, deep in his eyes, it was clear that he was branding this image of Bai Xiaochun into his mind for all time. That struck coldness into Bai Xiaochun's heart, but he reminded himself that he was one of the Grand Heaven Master's men, and that the Arch-Emperor couldn't hurt him even if he were more powerful than he already was. Stupid Arch-Emperor. I've smacked the giant ghost king across the side of the head, fool. I wonder what it would feel like to smack an Arch-Emperor. Swallowing hard to work up some courage, he waited for the heavenly marquises to all step forward. Before long, all of them were finished, every single one of them having uttered the words diva soul. Next came the 10 heavenly dukes, and not a single one hesitated about what to do. A diva soul, a diva soul. Chen Haosong was no exception. By this point, the imperial princes and princesses were trembling, although whether from anger or fear it was impossible to tell. In terms of Mistress Red Dust and the other representatives of the four heavenly kings, they too acknowledged that Bai Xiaochun had a diva soul. At that point, the square once again fell into silence. It was a silence that indicated that the Grand Heaven Master's overall power had once again skyrocketed, surpassing his previous level of power by far. After all, this was the first time that he and the Arch-Emperor had ever clashed publicly. One statement from the Grand Heaven Master had caused everyone to bow their heads in submission. That was a type of power that defied description. Just as Bai Xiaochun had said, the Grand Heaven Master didn't need to know what everyone was thinking. He just needed everyone to fear him. That was enough. Within the hall, the Grand Prince, the Second Prince, and everyone else present looked as ashen as death. Yet again, they were drowning in humiliation and fear of the Grand Heaven Master. At this point, they knew that it didn't matter what secret schemes they had been working on. In front of the Grand Heaven Master, they were so weak they could be defeated with a single blow. It was truly terrifying. More than anything though, they felt grief that the imperial clan had fallen to this level. At this point, the Arch-Emperor looked deeply at Bai Xiaochun, then rose to his feet. Without casting a glance at anyone else, not even the Grand Heaven Master, he walked out of the hall. The two sinister old men took deep breaths, glared at Bai Xiaochun, and then followed. The imperial princes and princesses scrambled after him, not speaking a word. However, all of them looked over at Bai Xiaochun before departing. The assembled officials and aristocracy were completely silent as they all looked over at the Grand Heaven Master on his black throne, who looked back at them with a dark gleam in his eyes. The truth was that he had been paying very close attention to everyone outside of the hall, including the heavenly marquises and the heavenly dukes. He had been studying the slight changes in their facial expressions, and even the fluctuations of their souls. Although he didn't say anything, that dark gleam in his eyes was very telling. At this point, he rose to his feet, prompting everyone in the square to clasp hands and bow. "Farewell, Grand Heaven Master, Arch-Emperor, you're all dismissed," the Grand Heaven Master said. Then he looked approvingly at Bai Xiaochun and said, "Bai Hao, you come with me." With that, he turned and headed into the back of the Grand Hall. Noting the approval in the Grand Heaven Master's eyes, Bai Xiaochun loudly said, "You're dismissed. All of you." At the same time, he sighed inwardly, and also started to get excited at the prospect of having done something so momentous. From beginning to end, he had controlled the initiative, and that was a very thrilling thing. Although he still felt a bit of lingering fear, the fact that he had the approval of the Grand Heaven Master had him trembling with excitement. "I really performed some meritorious service this time. I wonder how the Grand Heaven Master is going to reward me." Even as he hurried forward to follow the Grand Heaven Master, he realized that everyone was looking at him. Turning, he saw that many of the heavenly marquises and dukes were looking at him with the contempt of someone looking at a petty person who had unexpectedly achieved a position of power. And that wasn't very pleasing to Bai Xiaochun at all. That was especially true of Zhao Shanlin, who was glaring at Bai Xiaochun so fiercely that it seemed he wanted nothing more than to rip him limb from limb. "How dare you glare at me?" Bai Xiaochun thought. Then he flicked his sleeve, stuck his chin up, and loudly said, "Now that you've all confirmed that I got a diva soul, I guess that means I got really lucky today." With that, he suddenly threw the Foundation Establishment level soul toward Zhao Shanlin. "Heavenly Marquis Zhao, I have business with the Grand Heaven Master, so I'm leaving this diva soul with you for safekeeping. Tomorrow morning at first light, I'll go to your clan to retrieve it. Don't lose it. After all, that's a diva soul." Zhao Shanlin didn't even have a chance to react before Bai Xiaochun was gone. Zhao Shanlin was both taken aback and infuriated. However, the Grand Heaven Master was still present, so he didn't dare to lose his temper. He could only stand there panting, face twisted with rage, cursing inwardly at this blatantly open attack. "Damn this Bai Hao," he thought. "He gave me a Foundation Establishment level soul and is going to demand that I give him a diva soul in return." Zhao Shanlin was overwhelmed with anger, grief, and pain. To him, a diva soul was the type of treasure that could be encountered by chance, but never searched for and found. After all, diva souls were very useful for anyone attempting to become a diva, and could increase the chances of success significantly. Therefore, what Bai Xiaochun had just done was like adding injury to insult. Zhao Shanlin stood there trembling at how horrible things had just become. The other aristocrats in the area were stunned as they watched Bai Xiaochun walking off. They could almost feel cold chills running down their backs as they realized that Bai Xiaochun was the type of person who would take any opportunity that came his way. Totally ruthless. He's clearly screwing Zhao Shanlin over. When he goes to get that soul tomorrow, Zhao Shanlin will have to give him a diva soul. Although the Grand Heaven Master was already some distance away, with his back to the square, he was aware of everything that was happening. When he realized what Bai Xiaochun was doing, his cheek twitched. Whatever, he thought. Chalk it up as a reward for him. Bai Xiaochun's performance had been spectacular, and left the Grand Heaven Master feeling very pleased. Therefore, he simply shook his head and continued to leave. When Bai Xiaochun saw that the Grand Heaven Master wasn't interfering, his eyes lit up with excitement, and he strutted the entire way to Heaven Master Hall. When they arrived, the Grand Heaven Master didn't say much. He just asked Bai Xiaochun to produce his Inspections Manner Command Medallion, whereupon he waved his finger, sending a black glow into it. Henceforth, you command 3,000 troops. Head back and rest up a bit. Before long, your 3,000 corpse troopers can be mobilized, and then you can go get your reward yourself. With that, he entered Heaven Master Hall, not having even turned to look at Bai Xiaochun. Furthermore, he had never said a word about the objects Bai Xiaochun had secreted away from Heavenly Marquises Li and Chen. That alone spoke to the profits Bai Xiaochun would have after shaking down more clans. Excited at the prospects, Bai Xiaochun clasped hands and loudly said, Grand Heaven Master, for you, Bai Hao will go through hell and high water. After the Grand Heaven Master disappeared into the hall, Bai Xiaochun turned, feeling profoundly pleased as he left the Imperial Palace, taking his 1,000 corpse troopers with him. Looking very grand and magnificent, he quickly made his way back to the Inspections Manor. As for the heavenly dukes and marquises, and all the other nobility and aristocracy, although they hated him so much their gums itched when he passed by, they didn't dare to even look at him the wrong way. Back at the Inspections Manor, the first thing he did was use the command medallion to make connections with more of the subterranean coffins. Rumbling sounds filled the entire Inspections Manor as 2,000 coffins shot up into the air. Awaken, my army of corpse troopers, he shouted excitedly. Cracking sounds instantly rang out as the 2,000 coffins opened up, and numerous black-armored, burly men appeared. All of them emanated auras of rot, and the weakest among them were in the mid-nascent soul stage. Furthermore, this time, there were 4 who were half-devas. As the eyes of the corpse troopers opened, heaven-shaking, earth-shattering murderous auras erupted out. A black vortex appeared in the air above the Inspections Manor, which instantly attracted much attention from the people nearby. There are more corpse troopers over in the Inspections Manor? Is that 2,000 of them? In addition to the original 1,000, Bai Hao now controls an army of 3,000. 3,000 corpse troopers. That level of power is terrifying. He alone could start a large-scale war. Many among the nobility and aristocracy of Archemperor City realized what was happening, and they were shaken. Grim expressions appeared on their faces as they realized that Bai Xiaochun was building up terrifying levels of power. Bai Xiaochun was so excited he was trembling, and his eyes shone with bright light. Looking at his 2,000 new corpse troopers, he waved his hand, causing the original 1,000 to fly out. They quickly formed ranks, whereupon the black vortex above the Inspections Manor grew even larger. In addition to that, further inspection of the command medallion revealed that, in addition to the 2,000 new corpse troopers, he now had access to a new divine ability. After studying it briefly, he sent some divine sense into the medallion, which caused a black glow to appear. The black glow shot toward the corpse trooper who had absorbed some of the toxic gas created by the heart of a woman, and then risen to level of a diva. As soon as the black light touched the corpse trooper, he trembled, and his energy rose. Even as Bai Xiaochun waited in eager anticipation, he threw his head back and roared. As he did, his aura returned to the quasi-diva realm. However, Bai Xiaochun could tell that, if necessary, he could absorb the auras of other corpse troopers to temporarily go back to that peak level of power. This was one of the powers of the Inspections Commissioner Command Medallion which he had been gifted. Nobody will dare to provoke me now, he exclaimed, laughing heartily. Although it wouldn't be correct to say that he was invincible, it would be as easy for him to take out a diva as it would be to flip over his hand. He currently had a quasi-diva realm corpse trooper, 5 who were half-devas, and nearly 3,000 in the nascent soul realm. That was enough power. That if Bai Xiaochun returned to the Eastern Heavenspan region, he could challenge the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect. It was definitely the best choice to side with the Grand Heaven Master. Bai Xiaochun couldn't have been more smugly happy. All of his worries about being glared at by the Arch-Emperor had vanished. I'm definitely a big shot in the wildlands now. Not very many people are as important as me. Feeling almost intoxicated, he was just preparing to take his 3,000 corpse troopers out for a stroll in the city to make sure everyone knew how awesome he was, when all of a sudden, Bai Hao's voice could be heard from inside his bag of holding, and he sounded overjoyed. Master, I finally finished the formula for 18-colored flame. Bai Xiaochun's eyes went wide with excitement, and he even laughed aloud. Today was truly a wonderful day, so wonderful that he decided not to go for a walk. Instead, he set his 3,000 corpse troopers out to stand guard in the area, then went into secluded meditation and sealed himself up tight. At that point, Bai Hao flew out into the open. Bai Hao quickly inscribed the formula into a bone slip, then handed it over to Bai Xiaochun, who began to study it with intense anticipation. A moment passed, and he retracted his divine sense from the bone slip. After some thought, he looked over at Bai Hao, thinking about how priceless this formula would be anywhere in the wildlands. It would be considered even more valuable than a diva soul. Countless people wanted to have that formula. However, it was something that only belonged to clans with earthly necromancers. And clans like that would not lightly hand over the formula. Well done, apprentice, Bai Xiaochun said sincerely. If master can become an earthly necromancer, it will count as an enormous service on your part. What would you like as a reward? Name anything. Bai Hao's heart swelled at having pleased his master. To him, Bai Xiaochun was a master, but more importantly, his only family. Just being able to help him, and see him happy, was enough. Master, I don't want any reward right now. Let's worry about that later. The most important thing now is to follow this line of reasoning on to the formula for 19-colored flame. From the determination in Bai Hao's eyes, it was obvious that he was confident in being able to succeed. Furthermore, he was shaking with excitement at the thought of his master dominating the wildlands with that formula. I'm going to do everything in my power to help master become a heavenly necromancer. Having sworn this oath in his heart, he clasped hands formally to Bai Xiaochun, then returned to his soul-hoarding pagoda to start working. Bai Xiaochun was moved as he looked at the soul-hoarding pagoda and sighed. He knew that ghost cultivator techniques were something of great importance to his apprentice, and yet, he had no idea where to get such techniques. Where would I be able to get some ghost cultivator techniques? There are all types of techniques available in the Heavenspan River region. I bet I could find some there. Having decided this was the best angle to pursue, he sat down cross-legged and began to get familiar with the formula for 18-colored flame. The night passed quickly. This formula was actually very complicated, but because of his experience within the flame harmony realm, in which the faint 18-colored flame had become visible, he had a foundation upon which to work. Therefore, he actually gained a lot from that single night of study. The mere thought of actually trying to conjure that flame and become an earthly necromancer caused his heart to start racing. However, if I really want to conjure it, I'll need to do a lot of practicing. At this point, he looked outside and realized that it was light outside, and remembered that Zhao Shanlin owed him a diva soul. Putting the bone slip away, he stood up, stretched a bit, then stuck his chin up. All right, Zhao Shanlin, Lord Bai is coming for you. Even as Bai Xiaochun reveled in his success, he had no idea that back in Giant Ghost City, the Giant Ghost King had made a decision. After receiving the report from Mistress Red Dust about what had occurred during the ancestral sacrifices, his eyes had begun to shine brightly. What a genius. I definitely didn't misjudge this Bai Hao. It's impossible to say how far he'll go. He's definitely the perfect son-in-law. I don't care what his background is. Unfortunately, Moer's temper is a problem. If things keep going the way they have between the two of them, it will be hard for them to get along. After some thought, his eyes gleamed with a strange light, and he cleared his throat. Then he sent a message to Mistress Red Dust. First, he asked some general questions about her cultivation base, and then he said, Moer, I have a certain technique you can cultivate that will give you a 70% chance of breaking through into the mid-diva realm. However, you'll need to go into secluded meditation and cultivate it secretly. Mistress Red Dust was surprised. It seemed obvious to her that there was more to the story, but after receiving the technique and looking it over, she couldn't figure out what it was. Besides, the Giant Ghost King was her father, and couldn't possibly be out to harm her. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something fishy going on. She did a bit more research, but in the end, she was simply too anxious to achieve a cultivation-based breakthrough to hold back. Her previous fight with Bai Xiaochun had left her feeling very unsatisfied with her current cultivation base. Therefore, she went into secluded meditation and began to cultivate the technique secretly, just like her father had suggested. Good girl, the Giant Ghost King thought. Father isn't trying to hurt you. The technique won't do anything bad. However, after you emerge from meditation, you'll be a bit muddle-headed, and much easier to influence. In some ways, you can almost be brainwashed. Well, there's nothing else that can be done. You're just too smart, and if we let the situation stand, things will never develop between you and Bai Hao. The giant ghost king felt a bit guilty, but in the end, reminded himself that he was doing all of this for the betterment of his daughter. And that made him a very good father. Now that the first step of the plan was underway, the giant ghost king's guilt began to turn into excitement. As soon as his daughter entered her secluded meditation chamber, he called all of her personal guards over and instructed them to let him know as soon as she emerged. He spoke so strictly that the guards were very nervous and instantly agreed to follow his instructions. Having accomplished these things, the giant ghost king sighed. Success or failure now depends on fate. If they're not destined to be together, then nothing will work. The Zhao clan was located in Burrow 19. Considering that Zhao Shanlin was a heavenly marquis, their clan was very similar to the Li and Chen clans. The buildings were exquisite and beautiful, and the entire place was so grand that it was very conspicuous within Burrow 19. There were 2 enormous statues located in the main square of the clan, one on either side. They were dozens of meters tall, pure white, and depicted beastly creatures. Although the statues weren't made from spirit stones, they had been created using a unique method of equipment forging and special materials, which made them extraordinary, to say the least. Right in between the 2 statues was the Zhao clan's heavenly marquee pagoda, which emanated powerful fluctuations that ensured that anyone nearby felt a threatening sensation. At the moment, the various princes and princesses of the clan were practicing fighting techniques on one of the clan's training grounds, sparring with magical techniques and divine abilities. The eldest son of the clan, Zhao Dongshan, sat cross-legged in the position of honor. Although he seemed to be paying attention to the sparring going on the training grounds, he was actually preoccupied with other thoughts, to the point where his brow was slightly furrowed. Occasionally, he would look up into the sky and sigh. The mere thought of how his father Zhao Shanlin had returned the previous day looking extremely angry caused Zhao Dongshan to sigh anxiously. He knew some of what had occurred the previous day in the imperial palace, and it caused his hatred toward Bai Xiaochun to grow even stronger than before. So ruthless. He gave our Zhao clan a foundation establishment level soul and is expecting a diva soul in return. What a vile attack. Zhao Dongshan sat there grinding his teeth angrily, and yet feeling completely helpless. Yesterday evening, his father had given him a diva soul and instructed him on what to do with it, then had grimly gone into secluded meditation. Father, you think this is a loss of face, but so do I. Zhao Dongshan sighed painfully. After all, the Zhao clan only had 1 diva soul to their name, which had been given to them by Heavenly Duke Chen Haosong because of the good relationship between him and Zhao Shanlin. But now, they had to give it up. Zhao Dongshan's mood continued to sink the more he thought about it, and yet, there was nothing he could do. About this time, he suddenly heard a whistling sound up above in the air. As soon as he heard it, his eyelid twitched. Looking up, he saw several thousand beams of light flying toward him, accompanied by a dramatically murderous aura. This shameless Bai Hao just has to go and make a huge scene, all to collect a single soul. Zhao Dongshan was cursing inwardly, and his expression was extremely grim as he watched the thousands of figures coming to a stop right above the Zhao clan. In the lead position was none other than Bai Xiaochun, who flicked his sleeve proudly and spoke in a voice that echoed through the entire clan. Heavenly Marquis Zhao. Oh, big bro Zhao. Thank you so much for taking care of that diva soul for me. Well, I'm back today to get it, so could you please hand it over? Bai Xiaochun was feeling very pleased with the whole situation. Furthermore, after noticing that the person present to receive him was Zhao Dongshan, he didn't feel it appropriate to address him directly, not considering how lofty Bai Xiaochun's position was. A junior like Zhao Dongshan wasn't worthy to be greeted. Zhao Shanlin was inside the heavenly marquee pagoda, meditating fitfully. As soon as he heard what was happening outside, his face twitched, but he forced himself to ignore it. Down below, Zhao Dongsheng gritted his teeth and said, "Take this soul and leave, Bai Hao." With that, he flicked his sleeve, sending a piece of crystal flying out. There was something bizarre about the crystal and the way it shone with flickering light. There was also an incredible pressure that it sent out, making it seem completely extraordinary. Inside of the crystal was a ball of flame, which was none other than a fire-type diva soul. The crystal became a beam of light which shot toward Bai Xiaochun, who grabbed it out of the air. Smiling broadly, he looked down at Zhao Dongshan. "Hey there, young lad, you must be Dongshan, correct? Ha ha ha, how courteous of you people. You actually encased my diva soul in some crystal. Not bad at all. Very well, young lad. Uncle Bai is in a good mood today, so hurry over and offer formal greetings, and I'll give you a reward." Zhao Dongshan had offended him multiple times in the past, so there was no way he would let him off the hook today. Zhao Dongshan was so angry he could hardly breathe straight, and the fact that Bai Xiaochun had called him young lad was even more infuriating. However, the mere thought of Bai Xiaochun's incredible battle prowess, and the fact that he was the inspections commissioner, with a force of 3,000 corpse troopers behind him, ensured that he managed to keep his anger in check. You have your soul, Bai Hao. Just leave, alright? You're not welcome here. As soon as Bai Xiaochun heard that, his broad smile vanished, and his eyes widened into an angry glare. Pointing at Zhao Dongshan, he said, "What do you mean by that, young lad? I'm not welcome here? I represent the Grand Heaven Master. By saying that I'm not welcome, you're also saying that the Grand Heaven Master isn't welcome. You." Zhao Dongshan was so frustrated he wanted to explode, and was even about to explain himself. However, Bai Xiaochun didn't give him the chance. By not welcoming the Grand Heaven Master, you're showing contempt for the entire court, and the Arch-Emperor himself. Don't tell me that your Zhao clan has something to hide. Even as Bai Xiaochun yelled, his 3,000 corpse troopers emanated such a powerful murderous aura that it created a black vortex in the sky above the Zhao clan. No, Zhao Dongshan blurted. After becoming the inspections commissioner, Bai Xiaochun had come to fall in love with labeling people with false accusations. All they had to do was open their mouth, and he would strike instantly. After all, Zhao Dongshan's own father had suffered the same treatment. Even Heavenly Duke Chen Haosong had fallen victim, and had eventually chosen to just keep his mouth shut. Feeling guilty or something? From the gleam in Bai Xiaochun's eyes, it seemed that he believed himself to have found some important evidence. Up in the pagoda, Zhao Shanglin's hands were trembling with rage. However, this time, Zhao Dongshan reacted a bit more quickly than before. He quickly stepped forward, took a breath to suppress his anger, and bowed deeply to Bai Xiaochun with clasped hands. "Senior, Dongshan, offers greetings." "Greetings, exalted inspections commissioner." Zhao Dongshan felt like he was going crazy, to the point where he might cough up blood. However, this Bai Hao was not the same Bai Hao from before. Not even Zhao Dongshan's father dared to anger him, and therefore, Zhao Dongshan had no other choice than to submit. Bai Xiaochun looked discontentedly at Zhao Dongshan, wondering how he had managed to recover his composure so quickly. It was a real pity, considering that he had hoped to take advantage of the situation to extort the Zhao clan a bit more. It's no fun if they give in so easily, he thought. Unfortunately, he had no excuse to keep going. Muttering to himself angrily, he looked around the clan until he noticed the two pure white beast statues. "Those beast statues look a bit suspicious," he announced. "Men, take them away. Deliver them to my manor so that I can study them more closely." Instantly, hundreds of black armored corpse troopers flew toward the statues, completely ignoring the Zhao clan cultivators. Blue veins bulged out on Zhao Dongshan's face and neck. However, considering that his father hadn't issued any orders, he knew he had to simply hold his tongue. The hundreds of corpse troopers quickly took those two statues which the Zhao clan viewed as priceless treasures, and ripped them up out of the ground. Bai Xiaochun blinked a few more times as he looked around. Finally, his gaze came to rest on the heavenly marquee pagoda. Obviously, Zhao Shanglin was not planning to make an appearance. Feeling a bit irritated, Bai Xiaochun snorted and then turned to leave with his corpse troopers and the two statues. "How dare they provoke me? Zhao Dongshan attacked me multiple times. These statues are just going to be interest on what he owes me." Sticking his chin up, he began to strut away. After he left, an enraged roar echoed out from the heavenly marquee pagoda. Zhao Shanglin was enraged, but his anger was not sated, and could only be vented by continuing to howl in anger. Zhao Dongshan sat there bitterly, terrified of Bai Xiaochun. If he had known that things would turn out this way, then he would never have dared to offend him. And thus, Bai Xiaochun returned to the inspections manor, diva soul in hand, with two new statues carried by his corpse troopers. After arranging for his corpse troopers to stand guard, he went into his secluded meditation facilities and pondered what the Grand Heaven Master had said to him yesterday. "I'll just wait for some new orders. I wonder how many clans the Grand Heaven Master will have me shake down this time." Heart-pounding with anticipation, he was just about to go back to studying 18-colored flame when his expression flickered. A moment later, Zhou Yixing appeared right outside of his secluded meditation facilities. Zhou Yixing seeks an audience, Exalted One. Because Zhou Yixing had been acknowledged by Bai Xiaochun as a member of the inspections manor, the corpse troopers often gave him sharp looks, but wouldn't cause any problems for him as long as he didn't harbor ill intent. Of course, Bai Xiaochun was very pleased with Zhou Yixing's service so far. Therefore, he waved his hand, causing the door to the facility to open. Zhou Yixing took a deep breath, and walked in, a very serious expression on his face. Stopping in front of Bai Xiaochun, he clasped hands and bowed deeply. Trying to imitate the style of the Grand Heaven Master, Bai Xiaochun coolly said, Yi Xing. Make sure to get good and ready. The inspection's manor is going to be very busy soon. Zhou Yixing immediately voiced his assent. Then, he hesitated, looked left and right, and quietly said, Exalted One, what should we do with Songke? Songke? Bai Xiaochun was initially stunned, and it actually took a moment of thought before he realized that he had forgotten about Songke. Yeah, him, Zhou Yixing said in a low voice. He was the, guy who claimed to be the nephew of Bai Xiaochun, who you picked up in the Chen clan. Songke. Zhou Yixing looked at Bai Xiaochun for a moment and then cast his gaze back downward. Oh, him. Silly me. If you hadn't said something, I would have totally forgotten. Bai Xiaochun actually felt a bit bad. Not only was Songke one of his big lucky stars, as a member of the older generation, Bai Xiaochun had a responsibility to take care of the younger ones. Exalted One, Zhou Yixing replied hurriedly, you have a myriad of state affairs to attend to, and an entire nation to look after. Every decision you make is the type that can shake all of heaven and earth. You are constantly at the beck and call of all Arch-Emperor City, and spare no efforts in your duty. Your humble servant shouldn't have bothered you with such a trivial matter as this. My apologies, Exalted One. Please, watch your health. I won't bother you with things like this anymore. Bai Xiaochun was very pleased by the sincerity in his words, and how much they reminded him of the way he himself talked. Nodding approvingly at Zhou Yixing, he said, Never mind all that, bring him to me. Sir, yes sir. Zhou Yixing replied loudly, then turned and hurried away. Moments later, he returned with Songke, who he plopped down in front of Bai Xiaochun. Zhou Yixing knew that there was some relationship between Songke and Bai Xiaochun, and therefore, Songke was currently not wearing the same raggedy clothes he had been back in the Chen clan. He was dressed in a rough spun cloth garment, and had been cleaned up quite a bit. However, his eyes were just as intensely stubborn and maddened as ever. After being thrown onto the ground, he crawled to his feet, where he stood ramrod straight as he glared at Bai Xiaochun and yelled, If you're that tough, just kill me. My uncle will never let you off the hook. Although Bai Xiaochun was a bit startled by how he had yelled, his words nearly caused him to laugh. However, he covered it with a dry cough. Keeping his face straight, he circled Song Ke a bit to measure him up. His gaze caused Song Q's heart to tremble. As far as Song Ke could tell, it was a gaze of terrifying profundity. However, what was worse was how Bai Xiaochun poked and prodded him a bit here and there, leading Song Ke to shiver and think about what vile intentions he had. Stiffening, he once again resorted to a shout when he said, Even if I die, I'll never yield. Alright, enough with the yelling. Allow me to ask you something. Who is this Bai Xiaochun to you? Inside, Bai Xiaochun was smiling broadly, but he kept his expression somber, and even made it seem like he was afraid of this Bai Xiaochun. The truth, of course, was that he was eagerly awaiting Song Q's response. Song Ke was a bit surprised to see the expression on Bai Xiaochun's face. Obviously, not. Dying was the optimal outcome if it was possible, and therefore, the gears were already turning in Song Q's head. Bai Xiaochun is my uncle. Blinking, Bai Xiaochun kept his smile hidden away, and instead plastered an even more serious expression on his face. What did you just say? I didn't hear clearly. Eyes glittering, Song Ke raised his voice and said, Bai Xiaochun is my uncle. Bai Xiaochun's heart was racing with excitement, and he coughed dryly again to keep himself from laughing. He also tried to look a bit more scared. Are you talking about the guy in first place on the Hell Emperor Steel, the one with the shocking cultivation base, the one who countless women are enamored with, and who innumerable men admire? The man who everyone in the wildlands is searching for? That Bai Xiaochun? Song Ke was stunned to hear all of this, and Zhou Yixing placed his face into the palm of his hand at how obvious it all seemed, and the shamelessness of it all. Of course, there was no possible way for Song Ke to realize that the person he was standing in front of was actually Bai Xiaochun. However, he was a bit worried by the expression of fear he saw on Bai Xiaochun's face. Yeah, that Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun wasn't fully satisfied yet, so he plastered a look of disbelief onto his face and said, Hold on, I want you to be very clear about this. Which Bai Xiaochun? Are we really talking about the same person? So far, he was feeling very pleased with the act he was putting on. Song Ke was starting to get a strange feeling, but he proceeded with another explanation. I'm talking about the guy in first place on the Hell Emperor Steel, the one with the shocking cultivation base, the one who countless women are enamored with, and who innumerable men admire. The man who everyone in the wildlands is searching for. That Bai Xiaochun. By this point, he was starting to feel like maybe they actually weren't talking about the same person. However, this was when Bai Xiaochun gasped and backed up a few steps. Eyes wide, he pointed at Song Ke with disbelief. Heavens! I can't believe that you're actually the nephew of that Bai Xiaochun. Zhou Yixing stood there in a near daze, staring at Bai Xiaochun. However, he quickly looked down again, unable to keep watching. Song Ke was now starting to get a bit excited. That's right, I am Bai Xiaochun's nephew, and his only nephew at that. He really likes me, and has a lot of hopes for me for the future. He's my aunt's Taoist partner, so he'll definitely be coming to save me. If you touch a hair on my head, my uncle will definitely get revenge for me. He couldn't have stated it any clearer. Anyone who was listening would be very certain that Bai Xiaochun cared a lot about him. Furthermore, anyone who was interested in catching Bai Xiaochun would obviously not want to kill Song Ke. That in turn would make things a bit safer for him. Although Bai Xiaochun had no idea what anyone else might think of what Song Ke said, as for himself, it made him incredibly happy. How could I ever have guessed that, contrary to all expectations, you were actually telling the truth? Your uncle is none other than the heaven-shaking, earth-shattering Bai Xiaochun, whose cultivation base is matchless in all creation. Well, in that case, alright. Yixing, let's keep this guy here in the inspections manner. Start him out as a servant, and give him some resources to practice cultivation. HMPH. With him around, the notorious Bai Xiaochun, who is the ultimate chosen in the world, a person that countless individuals are infatuated with, will definitely walk right into the trap I'm planning for him. He emphasized his righteous, sincere words with the flick of a sleeve. When Song Ke heard this, he breathed a sigh of relief. Although he still had a strange feeling about the whole situation, he still couldn't put his finger on what exactly it was. Before anything else could happen, Zhou Yixing grabbed him and hauled him away. With that, Bai Xiaochun closed his door, sealed the place up, and then let loose a stream of uproarious laughter. Oh, care. I can only imagine the look on your face if you ever find out who I really am. The mere thought was exciting, but Bai Xiaochun also decided that he definitely couldn't ever let that happen. After all, he was a circumspect person in general, and also had to be on guard against Song Ke. Considering that he was deep undercover, he obviously couldn't reveal the truth to anyone. Besides, it was wonderful to hear Song Ke lavishing Bai Xiaochun with praise. From now on, if he was ever in a bad mood, he could simply call Song Ke over, scare him a bit, and then bask in the resulting praise. Now that Song Ke had been taken care of, though, Bai Xiaochun thought about Master God Diviner. I wonder where he is now. Probably somewhere else in the wildlands, I suppose. It was another mission on his list. After all, Master God Diviner had been one of his followers, and was likely in a horrible situation. Therefore, it was definitely important to find him and save him. Unfortunately, he had absolutely no clues to work with. After thinking about the matter for a bit, he sighed and put the matter to rest temporarily. Just when he was about to start working with 18-colored flame, his expression flickered, and he looked down at his bag of holding. Eyes lighting up, he produced the eternal parasol. The canopy of the parasol had been destroyed by Chen Haosong, leaving behind only the shaft. Thankfully, the beast hide he had found when shaking down the Li clan had been a perfect fit. Now, it was completely recovered. As soon as it was out in the open, it glowed with black light. As for the beast hide which formed the new canopy, it caused the parasol as a whole to emanate fluctuations which were many times more powerful than before. As of this moment, the parasol seemed completely different from before. As he held it, he could sense an incredible, shocking power inside of it. Unable to contain his excitement, he snapped it open. Rumbling sounds filled the room, and at the same time, the ghost face appeared on the canopy, with its enigmatic smile, and half-laughing half-crying ghost face. The ghost face was much clearer than before, and was actually a bit frightening to Bai Xiaochun. However, upon rotating his cultivation base, the feeling went away. My eternal parasol is finally fully repaired. 10 days passed by in a flash, during which time Bai Xiaochun never went outside. He remained in seclusion in the inspections manner, getting familiar with the formula for 18-colored flame. With Bai Hao's help, he was gradually making progress. He had even attempted to do a few conjurings. However, the resource wastage was incredible. The formula for 18-colored flame was different from other formulas, and took a lot more resources. In fact, to conjure a single 18-colored flame required that he first conjure 10 17-colored flames. Despite the fact that Bai Xiaochun had access to vast wealth, he still couldn't sustain such losses. What am I supposed to do now? He thought. However, even as he pondered the issue, the Grand Heaven Master did something major. After 10 days of thought and contemplation, he acted in lightning-like fashion to arrest 9 of the heavenly marquises. The arrests shook everyone in the wildlands, even the 4 heavenly kings. All of Arch-Emperor City was abuzz, and the remaining 90 or so heavenly marquises were panic-stricken. Although no action had been taken against any of the heavenly dukes, they were also filled with dread. In fact, all of them chose to go into seclusion, and refused to see anyone who called on them. They simply did not want to get involved in what was happening. Even Chen Haosong knew that he was in a very dangerous position, and simply kept his mouth shut and went into seclusion. After the 9 heavenly marquises were apprehended, their clans were left behind, trembling in terror. Furthermore, without express permission from the Grand Heaven Master himself, none of them were permitted to leave the city. While everyone in Arch-Emperor City was shaking in fear, Bai Xiaochun finally got his orders from the Grand Heaven Master. He was to go shake down the offending clans. At long last, Bai Xiaochun was able to make full use of his skills. He had been waiting for this day for some time. After the destruction of his spirit enhancement shop, he had been cut off from cultivation resource income. Now that he had been ordered to shake down some clans, he would finally get some money back. As soon as he had the Dharmic decree in hand, he was filled with excitement. It's going to take a lot of souls to practice with 18-colored flame. Too many to even calculate. There is really no trick I can use other than to simply practice over and over again. Shakedowns. If I shake down 9 heavenly marquis clans, then I can get to work conjuring some flame. Without the slightest hesitation, Bai Xiaochun took his army of 3,000 corpse troopers and immediately went to work with the list the Grand Heaven Master had provided him. The time had come to do something that he was starting to get a bit entranced with: perform some shakedowns. Fudge. I started shaking down clans almost as soon as I got to the wildlands. First in Giant Ghost City, and now here in Arch-Emperor City. In terms of shakedown skills, if I ranked second in the wildlands, then there wouldn't be someone who ranked first. Looking very proud and even disdainful, he headed toward the first clan on the list. As soon as he emerged from the inspections manor, it caused a big stir in the city. Even the most wicked and vile characters in the city got out of his way. The city folk trembled, and as for the nobility and aristocracy, they felt like they were in a nightmare from which they couldn't awaken. One after another, he took his terrifying army of corpse troopers to the clans and shook them down. He cleaned them out, down to the grass on the ground. Anything of value was taken, even building decorations. A storehouse of grain attacked by starving rats wouldn't have ended up as empty. However, the star of the entire show actually wasn't Bai Xiaochun, but Zhou Yixing. He was a true genius when it came to clan shakedowns, with eagle eyes that could find the most hidden of treasures. Thanks to him, every little thing was taken away. In order to make sure that he had plenty of resources to work with when concocting flame, Bai Xiaochun even woke up the little turtle. The little turtle was also very fond of shakedowns, and when he worked together with Zhou Yixing, they created a windstorm of calamity for anyone in their path. Quite an audience went along with Bai Xiaochun to watch him shake down the 9 heavenly marquis clans, and the sight left them stunned. Soon, all sorts of stories began to spread. This Bai Hao was born to shake down clans. How heartless. Heavens. He doesn't even let the houses stand, he tears them down. What eyes he has. Every time he points his finger, he finds hidden treasures. This Bai Hao, could he have been a pack rat in a previous life? The entire city was abuzz. Even more shocking to the people who were paying close attention was that Bai Xiaochun's first shakedown took 6 hours. However, by the time he got to the 4th, he only needed 4 hours to clean the entire clan out, and even leave most of the buildings in ruins. By the time he reached the 7th clan, he acted with explosive efficiency. He only took 2 hours to leave the 7th clan as little more than a crater in the ground. And yet, that almost didn't count for anything. Most shocking was the 9th clan. It only took a single hour, and when he departed, not even a grain of dust was left behind. It was a stunning event to anyone who could see it. Although Bai Xiaochun had experienced many things in his life, the amount of wealth he was amassing by shaking down these 9 clans caused even his heart to pound. In fact, he managed to get his hand on quite a few complete 15-colored flames, and even some flames of higher quality. Those completed flames were extremely important because they would enable him to cut down on the souls necessary to practice with 18-colored flame. As far as Bai Xiaochun was concerned, 17-colored flames were like precious treasures. By the time he reached the 9th clan, it took a lot of restraint on his part not to go shake down the clan located just across from them. When the members of that clan saw his greedy, bloodshot eyes, they hurried out to confirm that their clan wasn't on the list. After all, it would only take a single order on the part of Bai Xiaochun to send his 3,000 corpse troopers into their clan and ruin it completely. Because of his frenzied shakedown of the 9 clans, the name of Bai Hao grew even more infamous in Archemperor City. In fact, it also spread throughout the wildlands to certain almighty figures in the sects in the Heavenspan River region, who were privy to some of the things that went on in the wildlands. By this point, Bai Xiaochun was basically addicted to shakedowns, and thankfully, it was at this point that the Grand Heaven Master issued another set of arrest warrants. 7 more heavenly marquises were apprehended. When the Dharmic decree came down, Bai Xiaochun was delighted. Laughing heartily, he descended upon the offending clans in a storm of shakedowns. As a result, the nobility and aristocracy in Archemperor City began to use every means they could think of to reach out to the Grand Heaven Master and express their loyalty. For the first time ever, the Archemperor voluntarily went into secluded meditation, which seemed to be a clear message that he was trying to protect the aristocracy and officials. However, the truth was that he was bowing his head in an attempt to win public favor. The Grand Heaven Master knew that, but didn't care. He didn't want public favor, he wanted people to fear him. And that was exactly what he was accomplishing. Bai Xiaochun was very pleased, and shook down the next 7 clans with even greater efficiency. The spoils caused his eyes to shine as if they were made from gold. He was not a person who cared much about wealth, and yet, was struggling against the impulse to go shake down all of the heavenly marquis clans in the Archemperor dynasty. However, he was always careful to send 90% of the goods to Heaven Master Hall, with one main goal being helping the Grand Heaven Master understand how fabulously wealthy these heavenly marquis clans were. Furthermore, that wealth was one of the reasons for their wild ambitions. Sadly, after striking twice against the heavenly marquises, the Grand Heaven Master didn't do so again. Bai Xiaochun waited for a while, and then sighed sadly as he thought about the remaining 90 or so clans. The Grand Heaven Master is far too merciful. It would be way better to keep shaking down more of those clans. However, this session of shakedowns was over, and Bai Xiaochun had no choice but to go back to the inspections manor, where he once again went into secluded meditation. Thanks to all of the multicolored flame he had acquired, he began to get more and more familiar with 18-colored flame. In fact, he advanced by leaps and bounds, to the point where it was almost impossible to calculate how much time and effort he was saving. The fall of those 16 heavenly marquises pushed the Grand Heaven Master's power to new heights. The Archemperor was now in seclusion, and so were the imperial princes and princesses. Nobody from the imperial clan dared to even take half a step out of their official residences. Even the 4 heavenly kings chose to submit to the Grand Heaven Master in this situation. None of them did anything to provoke him. The Grand Heaven Master was currently the most powerful and glorious person imaginable, even more so than when he had become a demigod and forced the Archemperor to become his puppet. 3 months passed by. Because of the shakedowns, and because of the Grand Heaven Master's power, Bai Xiaochun was more famous than ever. In fact, there were few people in the wildlands who hadn't heard of the name Bai Hao. Savages and tribes both large and small feared him, and his notoriety grew as the stories about him spread. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.